what we call the point slope form. And the point slope form, I'm going to write that right here, point slope form is going to be y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So it goes through point 1, 2, and it has a slope, so I'm going to write over here m equals 7. Now I think the first thing when I'm given a problem like this, the first thing that I want to do is I want to label a few things. First of all, we should label this x value and this y value. In other words, this is x1, and this second one is going to be y1. So I have my slope, I have my x1 value and my y1 value, right? In other words, all three of these variables that we're going to substitute in just a moment. Now what we should do from here is we're going to go ahead and I would say rewrite this equation real quick. Y minus, but instead of y1, I'm actually going to put the y1 value, which is 2, is equal to, and instead of the m, I'm going to put my m value, which happens to be 7. And notice I'm just circling them as I put them in place. That helps me make sure that I used all the values. And I'm going to bring down my x minus my x1, and my x1 value happens to be positive 1 in this case. Always put your values in parentheses if you're substituting for a variable. Because if one of these were to have a negative inside, we'll have a sign change when we distribute the negative sign. So you do want to make sure that you always put them in parentheses. Close parentheses. So now you can see I've rewritten the point slope form with the values that they gave me, right? Using the ordered pair values of 1 and 2 for x1 and y1, and using my slope. Now at this point we're going to do some distributive property. And so I'm also going to put a note here and say this is really step 1 of you solving this particular problem. You want to put it in point slope form and then go ahead and start doing your math to solve for y. Now when I say distribute, I mean multiply. Remember there is an invisible 1 that's in front of this parenthesis. So really this is being, negative 1 is being multiplied to positive 2. And if you weren't sure about sign changes, you could always say, okay, negative 1 times positive 2, check in your calculator, and you would see, oh, that's just going to give me negative 2. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. Once I do the math here, it now becomes y minus 2 is equal to, over here, we do have a sign change going on. We have this negative sign, and in certain situations, you could get mixed up on this if you don't distribute this negative before you try to multiply the number over to it. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and distribute that. We're going to rewrite it. So let me bring down my 7. Notice I dropped the parentheses on the slope. You can always drop the parentheses on the slope for this particular variable. And it won't affect anything. But don't do that for the others. Keep the parentheses on the others until you do the math. So I'm going to write x. And when I distribute a negative 1 times positive 1, just makes it minus 1. Now I'm almost done. The next thing I want to do is distribute this 7 to both terms that are inside of these parentheses, because it's outside of the parentheses, which means it's supposed to multiply to each one of those terms. So I'm going to take 7 and multiply it to x. And just to show you what I mean, I'm actually taking 7 and saying, okay, 7 times x, which just gives me 7x. Then I'm going to take that 7 and I'm going to multiply it to this negative 1 right here. So 7 times negative 1. If you weren't sure what that was, I wasn't sure about the sign, you could just type it in the calculator, right? 7 times negative 1 gives me negative 7. So this becomes minus 7. I'm going to bring down my equal sign, and I'm going to bring down this y minus 2. We haven't done anything to it this round, right? We just distributed, and that was it. Now what I want to do is I want to move this 2 over to the right side of the equation, right? Because we want to get y by itself. So I'm going to go ahead. That's subtracting 2, so I'm going to do inverse operations, which is the opposite operation. So instead of subtracting 2, I'm going to add 2. that makes this cancel out and become 0. And to keep it balanced, I also have to add 2 to the right side. So I'm going to get my calculator, and I'll do 7, -7, because you have to keep the sign that's in front of the number with it, and then I'll add the 2. So -7 plus 2. Notice that gives me -5, so I'm going to move this up a little bit. This has now become -5. I'm then going to bring down the 7x in front of it. I'm going to bring down my equal sign, and the only thing left over on the left side of the equation, because this right here became 0, is just y. So I'm going to box it. So now what we have is we have an equation in slope-intercept form.